Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. And I gotta tell you something, people. I'm very excited to have this gentleman on my show today because he has had like the coolest life. Not only was he an All-American running back at an Ivy League school and runner-up for the Heisman, then he becomes a pro football player, which I had a football card of him, and he went to some Super Bowls, and then he gets out, and what does he do? He decides to become an actor, and he's on a few hit shows, he's on a groundbreaking show, and my mom always would say, when she saw him on Sisters, she would say, that Ed Marinaro is a handsome gentleman. And my guest is Ed Marinaro. How you doing, Ed?
How you doing? Good, doing good.
You know, I never got to ask anyone this. What's it like when you shoot a football card? Is it anything like when you shot your acting headshots, or is it completely different?
You know, it was certainly not any kind of big deal. I mean, they would come to the company, would come to training camp, and, you know, they get all the players that they wanted to have cards from, and they take a picture, and you had no say over, you know, approval or anything, and the shot just showed up. It wasn't very sophisticated back in the days, you know, in the 70s. I mean, I'm sure it's changed quite a bit now. You know, everybody has approval, and it's a big industry now. But, I mean, we did it for free, and we never got paid a penny for it. So
I had that
it's
card.
amazing, right? It's amazing when you think about it. And we didn't get paid anything.
You know, yeah, you'd think they would give you something because it's your likeness and it would make sense. And that's just, I never knew that you guys didn't get paid, because then I feel bad because I bought them and you guys didn't get anything.
No, we never did, you know, and, you know, it's interesting because, you know, in my day, you know, it was before, you know, the whole memorabilia craze. And, you know, I got so many requests in the mail, fan mail with cards in it. And, you know, when I was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, when I was in college, you know, I got covers sent to me and I would sign them. And then it became, you know, like a business. And, you know, I had a bunch of friends who, you know, I got to know over the years, golf buddies who were like Hall of Fame baseball players and Hall of Fame football players, and they stopped signing stuff because, you know, a baseball signed by a Hall of Fame baseball player was like, you know, you get $150 for it, and it turned out that they'd sign these balls or whatever, and then the guy who you signed it for would go sell it. So, you know, the whole kind of, you know, I don't know what you call it, but it wasn't as genuine and as it was, you know, back in my day. We didn't even think about. I mean, they would literally have kids come up in wheelchairs to get guys to sign stuff. You know, people would pay kids in wheelchairs to come up, and you couldn't turn them down. It you know, really took a lot out of the you know, the fan player kind of relationship.
Well, now you being an ex-player, I wanted to ask you, because they always say ex-football players, now football players, it's like a brotherhood. When Damar Hamlin got hurt the other night, does that really hit home for you more than most people because you played the game and you saw injuries?
You know, I think anybody who played football and was a fan of football, what happened, you know, it impacts you. I mean, you can't help but, you know, just personalize it a little bit and relate to a certain extent. You could relate to how his teammates felt when it happened. It scares the crap out of you. I mean, it's such a rare occurrence. I mean, it just doesn't happen a lot. And I don't think anybody is really prepared for that. It's just sort of like kicks you in the stomach. It's like a reality check, you know, that we're all human beings and no one's immune to stuff like that. So, you know, you know, I was just thinking about that. I was wondering how somebody who's not a sports fan, how somebody who's not a football fan, you know, it was all over the place. I mean, the media just covered it to death. But how they might have felt, how they saw this thing. It was sort of like a non-event for a lot of people in this country. If you're not a football fan, you're not a sports fan, you don't understand. It happened on national television. It was for a professional athlete, which is such a big part of our culture. But the average guy who's not a sports fan, he might have had a little better perspective than we did as fans. We kind of, it touched part of who we were, the things we enjoy. So I think it was. I made the sign of the cross several times. When I watched coverage, I felt for this boy, this young man. It was just scary because my son plays football. He plays at Cornell, and I can only imagine if I was watching a game of my son that happened to him. It would be devastating. But I think you have to look at it the way the world would look at it and not exploit the whole thing. And I've seen so much people opining on what happened. There was one article, and you probably saw it, where somebody accused football as being racist because injuries affect black players more than white players. And it's to somebody to even say that, it just shows the absurdity of the people that we let have a voice in this country. You talk about monitoring content. How anybody would even print an article like that? It's so absurd. Tony Dungy came out and said how ridiculous it was. But, again, that's just what we do today. And that exploiting this guy's misfortune is, as you saw, a lot of people, taking holier than thou positions. But everybody felt bad. I felt bad, like I said. So, it's just, I think it's a product of the society we live in and people wanting to just take advantage of any opportunity they can to voice their opinions.
Now, I want to talk about you said your son plays at Cornell, and you played, of course, at Cornell. When you were young, were you just better than, we had kids in Pop Warner who were just better than everybody. Were you one of those kids that would score 6 touchdowns a game? When did you start really getting in your gear? Because, you were an All-American. You had records. You were a great ball player. When did you know that you were good? Was it a young age where you were faster or you just had the moves? How did you know you were really good?
You know what? I when I look back at it, I realized I was really better than everybody. I started playing. You play in Sandlot, you play softball in grammar school. Then my first time I played organized football. I was 12 years old. In my hometown, we started a junior football league. And I was good, but I never felt like I was that much better than everybody. I guess I was insecure when I probably shouldn't have been. I didn't know how good I was. I always thought there was people that were better than I was, and that sort of, followed me my whole career. There's always thinking that you're not as good as somebody, but I always was, and I think, I think most athletes, we're not superhuman beings, and we don't look at ourselves the way other people look at us, and I look back now, I look at highlights of myself sometimes, and I went, wow, man, that was pretty good. I made a good run. But at the time, you just never, you always had some self-doubt, and I admire kids like this kid from the 49ers, the quarterback who, was the last player picked, and I'm sure was never considered to be ever being a starting quarterback in the NFL. And this guy just got it. That should be a role model for every young athlete in the world. For him to come from where he was and never doubting his ability. I admire the hell out of that. I think that's one of the great stories. It's kind of like a Tom Brady story. Tom Brady, I love Tom Brady, and the fact that he sat on the bench for 4 years and turned out to be the greatest of all time is just a great story and should be an inspiration to any young athlete. You never doubt yourself. Don't let other people put doubt in your mind. If you think you're good, you're going to get to the point that when you're not good enough. Reality is going to set in. But, you keep going and going until that reality sets in.
Now, why did you choose Cornell? I mean, it's an Ivy League school. And so were you wanted to get an education? Did you think you were going to go pro, or what was your philosophy? Because once again, that's a amazing college, besides, for anyone to get into it. So why did you decide to go to Cornell?
Well, I really looked up or admired all the smart kids that I went to high school with. I didn't struggle, but, I was a B student at best, and I wasn't, academically inclined. I didn't, I was a jock. I was an athlete. I played sports. That was my identity. And, I just, the prestige, even at a young age, I was only 17 or 18 years old, just the prestige that went along with going to an Ivy League school, coming from my background, I said, boy, would that be so cool. And I had I had 40 football scholarships. I had basketball scholarships coming out of high school. And, it's just, I never, you don't think about pro football when you go to a place like, Cornell or an Ivy League school. I wasn't really thinking about that at all. And what happened to me in college was the last thing I ever thought was happening. I wanted to make the freshman team because we had freshman football back then. And, God, we had the first day of freshman football, we had 130 guys show up to play football. I mean, there were 20 running backs. And, some kids were all state from Michigan. I mean, they were, and I'm going, oh my goodness, So I kind of emerged as the best back on the freshman team. And then I said, I want to make the varsity next year. And then when I made the varsity, I said, I want to be a starter. First string. And then I was first string. And then all of a sudden I was running all over the place and gaining all these yards. And I don't think it was till after my sophomore year, I was third team All-American. And that's the first time I thought about pro football. I said, I probably will get a chance to be a free agent. I'll get a free agent tryout by the time I'm a senior. And obviously it evolved from there as my career got better and people were, coming, and pros were coming to my school. And, I knew I was going to get a shot at pro football by the time I was a junior. So, I think it was a healthy evolution for me, and I tell my son that all the time. I said, you got to take one step at a time, one hurdle at a time. Don't get so far ahead of yourself. Take care of the business at hand. And that's kind of, I wasn't conscious that I was doing that, but that's kind of what I did. Maybe I was protecting myself from failure by getting too far ahead of myself, but I took one challenge at a time. And, obviously it worked out.
Now, it comes to your senior year, you're a runner-up for the Heisman, which, as you can say, you never thought that would happen when you were younger. At that point, do you know that you're going to be a first-round draft choice? Are you thinking, what is your thought at that point? Do you say, the hell with the free agent, I'm getting drafted? I mean, what is it like when you're sitting there and you're up for one of the most prestigious awards, and an award that most people know about?
Well, by that time I knew I was going to get drafted. I didn't know. I mean, I had teams call me, tell me I was going to be the first round pick, and second round pick and third round pick. Everybody was speculating, and I kind of didn't know what to expect. And, it was very exciting. I mean, obviously there wasn't the fanfare attached to it. I mean, I was sitting in my apartment in Ithaca, New York, when Jim Finks of the Vikings called me up and told me there was no draft parties. There were none of that stuff. I was with my college roommate, my girlfriend, and I got a call and then congratulations, you're drafted by the Minnesota Vikings. I went, oh, great. But, it was, it was totally different. People, I mean, I went to the NFL draft this year, and I announced the Vikings second round pick because it was 50 years ago that I was the second round pick, and they brought me into Vegas, and I did this whole thing. I mean, it was incredible. The hoopla. I mean, there were thousands and thousands of people in Las Vegas. And I was on the stage. I looked down. It was a sea of people, and I'm trying to, boy, that's a big difference than when I was drafted.
Now, once you get drafted and then you go to the Vikings, how much as a difference is how good pro players are to college player are? Is it like noticeable? And you're on a very good Viking team. I mean, they were a great team. But once you got into training camp, did you say, man, these guys are a level above what I'm used to?
Well, I think you kind of find out pretty quick that, they're bigger, faster, and stronger. And everybody who's on the team was the best player from their college usually. I mean, so, it's, the difference between a guy making it in the pros at a college is having that extra gear that you never had to use when you're in college. I mean, you think you're going as fast as you can and hitting as hard as you can and whatever when you're in college. And then you go to the pros and the holes open up like, you got to get to the hole really fast. You've got to be quick. And some people just don't have that gear. I had that gear. When I realized that I had to get there faster, I got there faster. And, all it takes is a couple of times running in there and getting, a helmet in your chest because you didn't get there fast enough. You adjust. And some people just don't have that gear, and they reach their potential when they're in college. And I think that's the difference, the big difference between the pros and college. And now, it's even, I mean, everything is, gotten the college, they're getting bigger, stronger, faster in college. I mean, when I was at Cornell, our offensive line probably averaged 215 pounds. Now, the Cornell line is 300 pounds, all of them. And this is Ivy League. So, it's the game is so much different. I really have I have no credibility to be commenting on what's going on in college now because it's just so different. Just what I hear from my son.
Now, what was it like stepping on to a regular season football game for the first time? Because so many kids dream of that. We all played sandlot or pee wee football. What is it like when you're sitting there and you go, oh my God? You look around and the stadium's packed and you're on the field. I mean, is it just an exhilarating feeling?
Yeah, one of the first games I played as a Viking was we had an exhibition game against the San Diego Chargers. And it was, I believe it was in Minnesota. This was 1972. And one of the quarterbacks for the San Diego Chargers was Johnny Unitas. And I grew up a huge fan of Johnny Unitas. I mean, I thought he was so cool back in the 60s and 70s. And there I am on the opposite sidelines of Johnny Unitas. And that was a surreal moment for me. And, it's, walking into the locker room when you're a rookie for the first time and you see all the guys you watched on television, like Fran Tarkenton and Alan Page and Carl Eller, and you're this little shithead, fresh rookie, that they don't even want to talk to. And it's all kinds of stuff, you're nervous, you don't want to make a mistake. There's a lot of pressure. You're trying to make the team. It's probably the most pressure I ever felt in my life, as a rookie, trying to, be good enough to make the team, because there's no guarantee that I was going to make the team, but I did.
Now, do you remember your first touchdown? I'm sure you do. Tell me about your first touchdown you scored for the Vikings.
Well, ever in my whole life, or as a pro?
As a pro.
As a pro, my first touchdown was the last game of the season in Minnesota against the 49ers. I caught a 12-yard touchdown pass. That was my first touchdown as a pro.
Did you keep the ball?
Pardon me, no. We didn't keep the ball.
That's because I see people.
If you kept the ball, they'd charge you $50, and we couldn't afford that.
Yeah, I mean, so you're playing and you're on the Vikings. You go to some Super Bowls. At what point do you feel your career is over? Does your body start feeling it? Do you feel slower? I mean, when did you know? Because the life expectancy of a running back is pretty small anyway. But when did you know that your football career was coming to an end?
Well, the sad irony was that, I was playing with the Jets. And I played with Minnesota for 4 years. And then I became a free agent, went to the Jets. Took me a couple of games to get, going with the Jets. But the last 2 games that I played in when I was with the Jets, we played the 49ers, and I gained 111 yards on the ground. And we lost. The next game, we played the Buffalo Bills at Shea Stadium, and I gained 120 yards. So I had back-to-back 100-yard rushing games, and I was on a roll. The next game, we played the Patriots up in a Monday Night Football game in Foxborough. And I think in the first quarter, I get hit from behind, somebody rolls on my foot, and separates all the bones of my foot. And I was done. I was done for the season. Back then they didn't know they did misdiagnosis before MRIs, and they didn't know what it was, but my foot hurt and I couldn't run, and I didn't do anything for the rest of the season. I came back the next year, never 100%, and I got released. And I was out of football. And that was probably 77. And mid-season of 77, I got a call from the Seahawks. This was their second year as a team, Seahawks. And they needed a running back. So they flew me in there, and I tried out, and I signed. I played the last 6 or 7 games with the Seahawks. And they offered me a contract for 78. And I was talking about that moving position. I thought about maybe being a tight end. I could have put on weight. I was a good blocker, a good receiver, whatever. And then I thought about where would be a good place for me. So I did some checking around, and I got invited to go to play in Chicago for the Bears. The general manager was the same guy who signed me when I was with the Vikings, Jim Finks. He was the general manager of the Bears. So I went through training camp with the Bears and made right to the last cut. Then I got cut, and I was done. But I kind of, it wasn't until, had I not gotten hurt, I would have probably played for 10 years. I ended up playing for 6, but I was very durable, and I was, that was the only injury I ever had. I never missed a game, in my whole career until that game that I got hurt. So, it wasn't until, I decided to go to Hollywood. I moved out to Hollywood and I started studying acting. And I remember right at toward the end of the season, I think it was probably 78, my agent called me and said, the Patriots are checking about, your availability. And I think there was only like 4 or 5 games left in the season. And I was not in good shape. I wasn't in football shape. And that was like my last moment where, my future was over after that as a football player.
Now, you went to Hollywood. When you were younger, did you want to be an actor? I mean, where did the acting bug come from? Because it's, as I said in the beginning, it's like you play pro football, which is someone's dream, and then you're an actor, a successful actor, it's just someone's dream. It's like you paralleled it. When did you get the acting bug? Was that something you've always had, or was it just when you said, what am I going to do? I'm a handsome guy. I'm in good shape. I've been in front of fans. I have the work ethic, because acting does take hard work when you study. I mean, what made you decide to follow that path?
Joe Namath and I were and are still good friends, and I hung around. I met Joe when I was a senior in college. I worked at his football camp the first year he had his football camp, which was right before my rookie year with the Vikings. And we just he was like a big brother to me, And after the season was over, I'd leave Minnesota, and he had a place down in Fort Lauderdale. I'd go down to Fort Lauderdale, and we'd golf and fish every day and go out and, chase girls.
Wait, real quick. What's it like going to a club with Joe Namath? Because the guy is legendary. I mean, did women just flock to you guys?
Yeah. It was pretty crazy. This was the 70s. And, it was crazy. Anyway, so I spent time with Joe out in L.A., and I met some people, just through him. Excuse me. And I pretty much got discovered because some agent, when I was out there, reached out to Joe's partner and asked if I would do a screen test. I had met him. Would I do a screen test? They were looking to replace Lee Majors in the $6 Million Man, and they were like auditioning all kinds of people. They flew me out to do a screen test. I'd never really acted before, and I went out there, and they gave me a contract which was about 10 times. If I got this role, about 10 times what I made playing football in Minnesota. And, that's what, I didn't get the role, obviously. Lee Majors came back to the show, but that got me interested. And that's when the next off season, I moved out there. I studied acting. And when I went back to play for the Jets, I got into an acting class in New York. And then when my career was finally over, I just, when I knew I wasn't going to play anymore, I just moved out to L.A. full time. I had an agent. I had my Screen Actors Guild card because I'd done some commercials. And, I spent a couple of years before I started getting any significant roles. And, got a couple of breaks, and the rest is history, I guess.
Well, you were on Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because that was a show. Once again, I love that show, and I think I'm 59, and anyone my age watched that show because you would sit there with your family and you had your TV nights. That's what we did. What was it like when you get on a hit show? I mean, it's something that you, as I said earlier, you're used to fanfare. You were on the cover of Sports Illustrated. You played in front of audiences, so. Is it just a different experience because now you're on this hit show instead of being in front of, thousands of fans in the audience, you have millions of fans watching you through the screen? It was crazy. It was crazy
to be on a show, that's a top 10 show in the country. It was the 6th year of the show, so they had this thing down pretty good. And at that point, the show was pretty dysfunctional as far as the cast. Everybody was crazy. I mean, they all had their own issues, and it was just crazy. It was pretty toxic. But I was new. I was making more money than I ever made, and I was on the hit show. Watching these really talented comedians working and stuff, and it was just really exciting. It was just, I was just thrilled when I got this role. It was like what you dream about. As a new actor, to get a role on a hit TV show was like, and then, I did a half a season, and then they fired me.
Why? Just any reason?
You know what? I just don't think that. Well, the show was on its final, run, if you will. I mean, it was. I just don't think they felt that I was worth paying for the role I was playing, and it was pretty devastating at the time. But it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, because a couple of months after that, I auditioned for Hill Street Blues. And, I mean, that was probably, my defining moment as an actor.
Now,
getting to be on a show like that, at the time, it was such a groundbreaking show. It was just unlike anything that had been on before that, and I was working with some great writers and actors, and it was incredible. I mean, just getting to do that quality stuff every week, it was.
Was the audition process for that a lengthy one, or did you get a call back, or did you just go in and you auditioned, they gave it to you? How did you get that role? Was it a few auditions?
Okay, I'll tell you, this is how it happened. My agent called me and told me I had a meeting at the studio where the Hill Street studio was, where the casting was. But I had a meeting over at the studio for a role in a movie about male dancers, male strippers. Like what's that?
Chippendales.
Yeah. So my agent says, while you're there, why don't you go over to the casting office of Hill Street Blues, and this is the first year of Hill Street Blues. It had a lot of critical acclaim, and, it was getting a lot of buzz from the industry, but, nobody was watching the show. So I go over there, I park my car, I'm walking into the studio, I run into a friend of mine who's in my acting class, and I said, where are you going? He goes, well, and he told me, I'm going over to the Hill Street Blues office. I go, yeah, I'm going to go over too. So I go over there with him, just to see what's going on. And they were auditioning another role at the time. All these actors were in this room. And, I went up to the receptionist. I said, I'm Ed Marinaro. My agent told me to come and say hello to Jerry Windsor, who was the casting person. Now, I thought Jerry Windsor was a man. Anyway, so the receptionist says, well, she's on her way over here. Oops. So I go and I'm talking to my friend, and Jerry Windsor walks in, and my friend says, that's Jerry Windsor. So I walk up to Jerry Windsor, and I say, Jerry, my name's Ed Marinaro, and my agent wanted me to come by. And she says, Ed, listen, I have to do these auditions now, so I'd love to meet with you, but we're going to have to reschedule it. If you can, get your agent to call me and we'll. I went, oh, yeah, okay, no problem. Yeah. So she goes off, and I go to my buddy and I say, well, good luck on this. And he says to me, he goes, Jerry, I think she's calling you. And I turn around and Jerry Windsor goes, come here. So I go over and she goes, would you audition for this role we have coming up? It's 4 episodes. It's the last 4 episodes of our season. And, would you audition for it? I go, yeah. She goes, well here's the scene that I want you to do. Go work on it. I got to do these auditions, and when we're done, So I go out. I'm sitting on the steps outside. I'm looking through the script, and finally, maybe 45 minutes goes by, and they call me in, and I go in there, and there's like 8 people in the room. There's the director, there's the producers, and so the character I read for was like Joe Coffey. So we do this audition, and I could see they were surprised that I was, they talked to me a little bit about football when I got in there, the guys, So I did the audition, and they said, hey, that was really good, and they said, hey, will you do it again this way? So I did it again. I go, okay, thanks, guys, and I left. And I remember driving home. I remember I had a cell phone in my car with the big cord on it, and I called my agent, and I said, John, I got this part. And sure enough, an hour later, they called, and I got the part. Now, I was supposed to, originally, I died in the last episode. So, I do these episodes, and I'm getting along great with everybody. I mean, it's really exciting. It was a fun show to do. Big cast, great people. It was just great material. And so the last day when I get killed, I'm supposed to get killed, there's a new script in my dressing room when I go to work. And they changed the ending where it's uncertain whether I died or not. In the first script, I was dead. In the second script, they go, he's at the hospital. We don't know yet. And I remember Stephen Bochco came to me on the set when we're shooting this scene, and he said, right now, the life of Joe Coffey is in the hands of your agent, because they were negotiating, and they actually shot 2 endings of the scene. One where I get shot like right in the chest. They had a stunt double. One I move like this, I get shot under the arm. So obviously, we made a deal, and I did 6 years of that show. And
what is it like when you're on a set like that? Because you said Bochco, and I know people who worked with Bochco before, and they said, he remembers everybody's name. He had that big house, I said, it's like a block along. What is it like when you're going to work and the product is going to be great? You're with fellow actors. Now you're with a crew who, like, after the 3rd year, they've been working, the camera, everything. Is it just a relief because sometimes you walk into a set and people are jerks. This, though, everyone, you're going in. I mean, it must be a great feeling as an actor because it's probably like a second home to you.
Well, I was so new. And the little that I had done, I mean, I did a comedy, Laverne and Shirley. And there was a lot of crap being produced and stuff, back then. And I didn't realize how good the show was written until after we'd done shooting it every year, I would always do a TV movie or whatever, these women in peril movies, and it was just horrible writing, I mean, it was like, I would laugh. I'd have to say lines that would make me laugh. I go, really? It was really funny. And it showed the contrast between how good Hill Street Blues was compared to what television was. I mean, remember, with all due respect, we came on when Chips was popular, when Charlie's Angels was popular, all these flashy, beautiful people. And I remember one review of our show, they said we were the most unattractive cast in television, which at the time was offensive, but, I guess it was a compliment, at the end of the day. So Yeah, I mean, and again, you don't really appreciate it when you're doing it, when it's happening. Just like in life. I look back at my football career, my college career, and I can reflect and see it in a lot different light now. And the same thing when I was doing Hill Street Blues. I didn't know how lucky I was, and I think working with those people, I just became a better actor. Um, when you do great writing, it's so almost like actor proof. It's hard to screw up the writing because it was just so good. And the first 4 years were really good. And like anything else, when you have success, it changes. And the last 3 years, I think everybody was kind of ready for it to be over, even though they didn't want it to be over. Playing the same role for 7 years as an actor, I mean, certainly it's, profitable. You're making money every year, but it's, you lose a little bit of your edge. And, I don't think actors are meant to play the same role for 7 years, And the writers changed. When you're on a successful show, everybody hires you away. They take all the top writers and they want you to do your own show. And so after the first 3 or 4 years, that's what happened. We had great writing staff. We always had good writers, but bringing in new writers, they just tried to look at the other shows and tried to figure out how to, kind of do their own stuff yet,
When that
take
show,
what they saw in these other stuff.
when that show ended, did you have offers coming in, or did you have to get back and audition again? Because I would think you're on a hit show, you would get the offers, and it's a critically acclaimed show. What was it like after that show ended?
Well, I left the show a year early. I asked to be written out. I knew we were only going to do one more year. I did 6. We did 7. So that last year, I was in a good place, and I wanted to be more than just one of 14 people. And I had a lot going on, a young, good-looking guy and stuff, and I ended up doing. So I did a pilot for a TV series, and did a couple of TV movies. The year that after I left, I made more money the year I left than I did doing Hill Street Blues for a year, my best year. And it's just the business started to change. There was a stigma attached to being a TV actor as opposed to a movie actor. Okay. And, we were very popular on TV, but we never really got any opportunities, none of us, to do movies. Okay. There was a stigma attached. Their thinking was, why would somebody pay to see an actor they could see for free on television? Okay. That was the, the general feeling. And it started to change when guys like Bruce Willis, who was really popular on, Moonlighting, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then I remember George Clooney. I worked with George on a show called Sisters.
Right.
Yeah, and, he was on ER, and the show was really popular, and people started saying, hey, they like a guy on television, they'll come and see him in a movie. And that was he was the first guy that I remember along with, obviously if you go back to Steve McQueen, Clint Eastwood, and those people, that was in the 50s and 60s. And TV wasn't as big as it was, in the 70s and 80s. They certainly had movie careers, but, the exposure that you got doing movies, it sort of hurt you as far as being any box office possibilities. So, we got pigeonholed and stereotyped, in that period of time until, things changed. And, look, I've done I've guest starred and stuff. I've done a bunch of stuff. I had a series on a few years ago called Blue Mountain State that was, a big cult hit for these 20-something-year-olds.
And you also played Joey Buttafuoco. What was that like?
Played Joey Buttafuoco.
Did you meet him?
That was crazy. That was, when you think about it, that was how tame our society was when they felt they needed to make 3 movies about Joey Buttafuoco having an affair. I mean, compared to this, what's going on today in the world, that was like a fairy tale. But that was fun. I got to do some fun. I got to do Falcon Crest. I got to do. I don't think I did Dallas. What was the other? What was
Dynasty?
Joel Collins' show?
Dynasty.
What Dynasty? I got to do Dynasty. I got to work with. I had a stage kiss with Joan Collins. That was. She was a hottie.
That had a really talented cast. I mean, the act Seal Awards, Swoozie Kurtz, Springsteen's wife, Julianne Nichols or Phillips, whatever.
Yeah.
What was that show like? Was that an offer? Did they say, "Listen, Ed's established. We're going to get this role"?
Yeah, that was. That was a chick show. It appealed to. It was a woman's show, and I was. I was the guys, one of the guys, and there was no toxic masculinity coming from me in that show. It was just this really nice, easygoing, loving, understanding guy. But I had 4 years on it. It was good. I mean, I think it showed a different side of me, for my career. It was good. The girls were great. They very, very talented group. Writing was interesting, but it definitely had a target audience they were going after.
Now, what are you doing now? Do you still? I mean, you've had a very successful life. I mean, you think about it: Sports Illustrated, Super Bowl. I had your football card. My mom thinks you're handsome. You had the TV shows. What is it? What do you do? I mean, do you still have the drive to act because you've accomplished so much? I think. Do you act now just when something comes up, or are you still pursuing it?
Well, I think the concept of work is a lot more appealing than actually doing it. I know I can still do it, and you hear people say this all the time, but I'm a better actor today than I was, 20 years ago. But, when you get to be my age, you get to, there aren't as many roles for older guys, like good roles that you'd want to do. I have to keep my ego, I can't play stuff that, I don't have to. First of all, I've been really lucky. My life is fine. I don't need to work, which is a great luxury to have. I don't need to. I've done well. And, but I still, because I know I can do it. And I have agents. I have an agent in New York, LA. I have an agent in Atlanta. And I get stuff sent to me, to audition for. The good thing now is, I moved from LA 12 years ago. I live in Charleston, South Carolina right now. And if it wasn't for technology, I'd be out of the business. But now when I have auditions, I just do them on my phone, send them to my agent, then my agent sends them to whoever wants to see it. So I can still be in the business, I would like to work more. I did a movie that just came out. I did it a little over a year ago. It was just out on Hulu. It's like a holiday movie. Yeah, I mean, but I'm not, I probably don't do enough to, promote myself, if you will. I'm pretty low key. I don't want to get involved in, social media crap. And, I try to keep my integrity. I'm very protective of my legacy. And I'm not going to do anything just to sort of get myself out there. I mean, I won't do that. I just, too much pride in myself, and I see what goes on. I mean, yeah, it's I don't want to try to be relevant when I'm not relevant anymore. In a desperate attempt to be relevant, you'll do and say anything, and I don't care. I'm relevant in my own brain. I'm relevant to my son and my wife and all my good friends, and I'm just not going to compromise my integrity. And I think that's what you have to do in today's world when you're a public figure. You have to make sure everybody knows who you are, where you are, and what you think. And I don't want people to know what I think.
Right. I have one final question. It's a two-parter. Growing up, what football team? I know you're from North Jersey. I'm an Eagles fan. I grew up near Philadelphia. What football team were you a fan of?
Well, I was a New York Giant fan growing up. That was before the Jets. Ironically, the first pro game I ever saw was I was 10 years old, and it was the first year of the New York Titans, and they played the Houston Oilers in the Polo Grounds, and Don Maynard was playing for the New York Titans, and Billy Cannon, I don't know if you remember that name, Billy Cannon won the Heisman Trophy, he played at LSU. He was a running back for the Houston Oilers, and the quarterback for the Houston Oilers. Can you guess who that was?
For the Oilers? Well, it's before
1960.
Oh man, I don't know. Y.A. Tittle?
George Blanda.
Oh wow, and he played like he was 50.
Yeah, he played a long time. Almost 50. So I grew up like a Giant fan during the Y.A. Tittle, Del Shoffner, Rosie Greer, Rosie Brown, Andy Robustelli, Sam Huff. Those guys are, guys I, followed. Then the Jets came along. When I was growing up, you were Yankee or a Giant fan, and then a generation after that, you became a Jets or Mets fan. So I've always been a Giant Yankee fan, big Yankee fan.
Are you still a Giants fan, or do you have allegiance to the Vikings because they're playing this weekend? So I just wonder.
That's right. You know what? I root. I don't have a lot of ties anymore to the Vikings, except that I played for them. I'm so removed from that team. I'm 2 stadiums removed from the Vikings. I mean, I played in the old Met Stadium. Then they had the Metrodome. They tore that down, and they have this new stadium now. So that makes you feel old. I follow them. I follow the Vikes, but I'm not I watch football, but this is the time of year when I really watch football. Because the first half of the season means nothing. You could, as proven this year, aren't the Bucks, they won their division with a losing record or something? Yeah, it's interesting to see. I like to look at the teams that are, who have scrap and fight to get into the playoffs. They're the dangerous teams, the teams that have, a lot have locked up the. When you start to like rest players, I always worry those teams that rest players when they have to get back into it again. Are they going to be ready?
Right.
So this is an interesting time. And who's playing? The Vikes are playing. Are they playing in the wild card game?
The Vikings won their division. They're playing the Giants. They're playing the Giants on Sunday because I'm an Eagles fan. The Eagles have a bye, but the Vikings play the Giants.
So didn't the Vikings win their division?
Yeah, but there's only one team gets a bye. The team with the best record.
Oh,
So then things. So yeah, it's crazy.
See, that shows you how much I follow.
Well, I predicted the Giants to beat the Vikings, so that's a good thing. But I want to thank you for taking the time today. It was good to talk to you. As I said, a fan of your work. And I had that football card when I was a kid. Do you have a website or anything? You're not into social media. Do you tweet at all? I know you're on Twitter. Because that's where I found you. Do you tweet at all?
Yeah, I tweet now and again. Just sort of innocuous stuff. I don't try not to cause any controversy.
So people go look up Ed Marinaro on Twitter. If you can find Hill Street Blues, watch it. It's groundbreaking. It's one of those iconic shows. You can go to my website, coopertalk.net. I have over 940 episodes. You can email me, Cooper at coopertalk.net. Twitter at coopertalk. Instagram at coopertalk1. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next time.